Welcome to Intro to A3. My name is Al Diaz. I'm the IT Process Improvement Director for the Department of Public Health. I am delighted to have you in my class today. As you can see in front of you, here are our learning objectives. I'm not going to read them to you. You can see them on the board. If you've been in my classes before, you know that we review a lot of what we've done in our previous class before we continue on to our new learning. We can use many of these slides through a Creative Commons license. So thank you, Mike Rother. First thing we're going to talk about is scientific thinking. We know when we look at a problem, when we walk into a meeting, when we look at a new project, we're thinking to ourselves, what is the purpose of the change? How are we improving the actual work? How are we building capacity? And what new behaviors, both in leadership and management, is required for the change to occur? We also think about what basic thinking and mindset and assumptions and constraints exist not only within our project, but also within our culture. We know that when we look at scientific thinking, hoping to create a change by just listening to it, going to a class, reading a book, really doesn't work. We don't behave a certain way because we lack information. We behave one way or another because it's a habit. And if you've been to the coaching habit workshops, you know that that's one of the ways that we align what we're doing in regards to our lean transformation, aligning habits with lean. Because you don't go out and run 20 miles on the very first day of training for a marathon. You run out and run maybe a quarter mile. Improvement katas, routines, another word for routine, and coaching katas, another word for routines, are all about developing a scientific pattern of thinking. And the way that we do that is through deliberate practice. And there are 4 steps of the improvement kata model. The very first step is, what is the final direction? What is the final challenge? Where are we headed? Because without a purpose, without understanding the process, without understanding the people involved, it's hard to get things done. Purpose is what the customer's problem is. Process is how will the organization assess each of the major value streams as we understand the purpose of the problem. And finally, when we talk about the people, how can the organization ensure that every important process has someone responsible not only for today, but also for sustainment. But then we have to take a step back and we have to understand the current situation. Some people call it the as is. The current situation is where we are at today. And what we know is that something is broken. There are symptoms of a broken process. Maybe the customer is unhappy. So when we talk about establishing the next target condition, is we want to describe the future state that is just beyond our current threshold of knowledge. Remember, the improvement kata is used to navigate unclear territory. It provides a test, a hypothesis to test against. When we ask, what is preventing us from just working the new way? It reveals the obstacles. That's the start to writing down what is going on. And it also describes your future state using measurable metrics. Now, what is the target condition also deals with, as I mentioned moments ago, with the interim goal. In Agile, we might say that there's a series of sprints to get to the next target condition. In PMI, we may say there are several milestones before we finish this particular phase. The target condition only describes where we want to be next. But remember, between the next target condition and our current condition is the threshold of knowledge. We understand the current situation, we analyze our causes, and we try different experiments, study the results, and make our adjustments. We don't go around looking for waste to eliminate. We look at waste throughout the entire value stream.
And again, sense of direction, you know what it looks like, the improvement kata pattern. It's experimenting your way forward instead of trying to decide your way forward. We know that trying to decide your way forward means we're going to be relying on our bias, right? So we have a challenge, number one, with that challenge out there. Number two, we figure out where we are, what's the actual condition now. We establish a next target condition on the way to the challenge. And then there's a series of experiments that take place at the knowledge threshold. Okay. Third point I'd like to make about scientific thinking is that it is by definition a learned skill. Because we have those natural unconscious mental mechanisms, that's a cat on the chair, oh no it's not, it's just my jacket, right? We have those natural mechanisms. It is by definition something you learn, it's not something you're born with. But how do you learn it? Acquiring a new skill, mindset, and habits takes some practicing. Knowing is not enough. Here's a person reading. Reading is useful. Toyota Kata book may be useful, but that's not going to change anything in our mindset and behavior. Likewise, attending classes, good way to introduce things, attend a conference, but you're not actually going to change your mindset by listening to someone talk. It really takes daily or frequent practice. If you're going to practice, you need to have something to practice. Those are like routines or kata, at least for beginners. Generally, we need to do it with some coaching. If I practice and Wayne doesn't coach me, I'm going to practice my existing habits because those are the ones I automatically do. And finally, there has to be some sense of progress, some sense of mastery. I'm getting better at this. So those are some ingredients of changing how we think and act, or changing how we act and then think. So, what's new here? Number one, scientific thinking is not new. If you look it up, the scientific thinking as we know it today is about 400 years old. And if you broaden the definition of scientific thinking a little bit, you're back with the Greeks, and who knows, we don't have any records before that. Deliberate practice is not new. Anyone who has done anything with music and sports knows that those are things that have been around for a long time. However, I think combining these two things is at least somewhat unique. Taking the idea of scientific thinking as a meta skill and combining it with routines of deliberate practice is a pretty neat idea.
So welcome back. So now we're going to talk about PDCA, PDSA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, Plan, Do, Study, Act, and then we'll watch a quick video. Many of us have backgrounds in IT or in project or project management, and we know from many years of experience that we see people try to start in the middle. We need some new KPIs. Okay, let's get around the conference table and do that. That doesn't work very well. At the heart of Lean, there's plan, do, check or study, and then make adjustments. A scientist will go ahead and plan a predictable, testable hypothesis. They'll sit and they'll go ahead and say, all right, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to have a hypothesis. I'm going to plan it, and then I'm going to take action on it. And when I take action, I'm going to conduct experiments. And then this scientist is going to evaluate the outcome of that experiments with facts and data and his expert judgment. And finally, he's going to interpret the evidence of the data. Many of us have a background in project management or may even be PMP professionals. So I wanted to include this slide in the presentation so that you could see the similarities between PMI and PDCA. We kept the term plan as in the planning process group of PMI. Instead of the word do, PMI uses execute, which represents the execute process group, and they replace check with monitor and act with control. So those are some of the changes that you see between the two, and I thought that it was important to bring that up at this part of the class. And now let's watch this short video on PDCA from Gemba Academy. We own the license.
Okay, let's move on to the specifics of PDCA and discuss each phase in turn. Now, to start the process, we first plan the improvement by clearly and objectively stating the problem while also giving some background and context so that everyone involved gains a common understanding of the issue. Now, we also work to identify root causes using tools like 5 analysis as well as tools like brainstorming to develop potential countermeasures that can be implemented during the do phase. Now, another key aspect of the plan phase is to identify what our target condition is while developing an action plan detailing, at a minimum, who will do the action, what the action is, and when it'll be done. In other words, we need to determine how we want things to look and what we need to do to get there. Now, one last note about the plan phase. Contrary to what some think, the planning phase is not linear. In fact, one could even say that there are actually multiple PDCA loops within the P phase itself as we work to define a strong problem statement, a target, identify root causes, and develop multiple countermeasures. An open coil spring is often used to explain this. Now imagine each loop of the spring becoming a single cycle of PDCA, meaning with each complete PDCA cycle, our knowledge and awareness of what the problem truly is increases. In other words, we start at the top of the spring with little to no understanding, and then finally, after several cycles, we have a much better understanding of what's happening and what to do about it. Now, after the plan phase, we arrive at do, which has us following the scientific method to test the hypotheses. Now, to do this, we change things, and if the change isn't good, we change it again until it's better. Now, some actually call this try-storming. Now, an important point to remember during this phase is rather than waiting for one perfect solution, we should try many small things that can be done quickly. And just like the plan phase, there will also be several mini versions of PDCA within the do phase. In other words, we'll try things and learn while following that up with trying again and learning more. And after several iterations of this, we'll have been able to make a positive impact on the business. Finally, during the do phase, we want to gather data based on direct observation of the experiment. In other words, we must go to the gemba, or the place the work is done, in order to actually see what's going on with our own eyes. Now then, after the do phase is check, sometimes referred to as study. Now during this phase, it's time to face the facts while reflecting carefully on what worked and what didn't work with the experiments. In each case, we want to ask why until there's clear understanding of what was effective and what wasn't. Lastly, during the check phase, we also need to practice something called Hansai, which is often translated as reflection or even repentance. In other words, practicing Hansai affords us the opportunity to truly reflect on what went right and, more importantly, what went wrong, allowing us to try to learn and adapt to these issues. And finally, we come to the fourth phase of ACT, sometimes referred to as adjust, which has us working to understand why things might not have turned out like we thought they would, as well as the changes to make as we prepare to turn the PDCA cycle again. Or, if the experiment proves successful, we'll standardize and share the success throughout the organization. Now, this horizontal deploying or copying of ideas that have worked throughout the organization is often referred to as yokoten and is a key aspect of the way companies like Toyota work. Okay, and that's the PDCA process. Again, as we've learned, PDCA is not a linear process. In fact, we'll likely experience many versions of PDCA within the plan and do phases. Also, PDCA is not a one-and-done activity. In other words, once we've successfully improved a process, we won't stop and rest on our laurels. Instead, we'll prepare to set new targets toward the ideal condition as we turn the PDCA cycle again.
Hey, welcome back. In this section, we're going to be talking about principles in action. I encourage you to take the A3 class being offered by Dr. Hewen, Dr. William Hewen at Zuckerberg General Hospital. I attended his A3 class, and he and his staff are excellent. And this slide I took from their book. I hope they don't mind. It talks about creating value for the patient, and we create value for our customers, the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, medical technologists that work the IT systems that we support. We also want to lead with humility and respect for the individual. As IT practitioners, we have a lot of respect for the work as well. We are becoming a learning organization. We are learning consistently every month. That's thanks to Barbara, to Bill, and to Winona that have really made substantial investments to make this happen. So the Intro to A3 class is about practicing scientific thinking, which is A3 thinking, guided by humility and respect for the work, and practicing humility one step from the person that we are coaching. So we want to be light on assumptions or reactions. We want to have shared understandings with our customers. For those of us that took the Ken Homer collaborative communications class, we talk a lot about shared understanding with the people that we're talking to, and we want to live the principles. I encourage all of you to read Humble Inquiry. You can find a summary in the Learner app. Humble Inquiry talks about the gentle art of asking. I'm guilty of telling, because when you're being pushed by deadlines and you've made commitments, you don't really have the time in the Western culture to be able to cultivate relationships. But we know from the data that asking fosters much better relationships than telling. So in Humble Inquiry, they talk a lot about clarifying, cause and motive, action-oriented, and systemic. So I encourage all of you to pick up at least the summary in the DPH Learner app. Some of us have attended the Coaching Habit workshops. In the Coaching Habit workshop, as it applies to A3 thinking, we talk about the reason or the motive for change. There must be a motive. Then a trigger, something that creates the new habit, the new process. Because without understanding what the triggers are, we'll lead back to the old process, to the old habits. And then obviously the next step that we learn is the micro habit, something small that we can practice that will effectively lead to something bigger, a breakthrough. And nothing happens without practice. Sustainment is the much tougher part of Lean and all methodologies. This section, we're going to take our first look at the A3. This is the same A3 that they use at Zuckerberg General Hospital. Again, this slide is from Dr. Hewen's A3 class. Single piece of paper, A3 paper, 11 by 17, allows the team to identify the most critical elements following the PDCA, PDSA formats. You're going to notice that the right side talks about the to be and the left side talks about the as is. Every A3 follows a process. You notice that if you have a project charter, if you're a PMP, you're also going to have a title for your project, the background, the current condition, the analysis. You're going to have a lot of the similar things that an A3 does. A brief video from Gemba Academy.
The format of the A3 is flexible, but the A3 creation process is standard. In other words, there's no golden A3 template that must be used, since the A3 isn't a rigid template at all. Instead, it's a report meant to tell a story. And just like a great series of books, every A3 report is slightly different. Now, there are many different ways A3 reports can be leveraged, including problem solving, where a team may focus on things like quality escapes and safety incidents. A3s can also be used to help a team justify capital expenditures. In other words, instead of simply asking to buy a new $1 million machine, the team could use the A3 thinking process to carefully analyze the situation in a fact-based manner. In a similar way, when an organization feels like they need to hire additional employees, A3s can be used to help make their case. Next, A3s can be used to help with project planning, as well as to document annual plans.
Welcome back. What we're looking at on the screen is the A3 used by Zuckerberg San Francisco General. And if we take a good look at it, we're going to notice that on the left side is how things currently are today. And on the right side is how we collaborate with our teams and our stakeholders to reach the target condition. Construction of a good problem statement is important because we want to be as specific as possible. We want to be able to measure the baseline. We want to be able to compare to a target so that we can demonstrate a gap. Here are some tips, again, provided by the A3 class that I attended at Zuckerberg General Hospital. This is what they provide as some of the tips available. Notice for the background, what is the problem internally? Be specific. What's the impact to your key stakeholders? Is the work that you're doing aligned with our strategy? And why are we talking about this now? Why is it important right now? Or we haven't hired 2 people. We need to hire 2 people. But a better statement would be, hey, 50% of our patients are waiting greater than 2 hours, and we need to hire some more people. What about we need a communication plan? Or 25% of our staff is not aware of what's going on. As you can see, the more specific that we make it, the better it is, not only for us and our teams, but also for our stakeholders. So let's keep moving forward and jump into how we build one of these A3s.
Current state in this section. In other words, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? We'll also use this section to identify the gap between the target and actual condition. In this section, we document background and support data. This is where we share facts and figures. And when possible, it's always helpful to use charts and graphs since, as they say, a picture isn't indeed worth 1,000 words. Now, up to this point, we've only focused on describing the current state of the process. In this section, we're going to focus our efforts on root cause analysis. Again, we cover the 8-step practical problem-solving process in great detail in our PPS course, so please be sure to view this course if you're not familiar with this process. But as a review, during this step, we'll use tools like the 5-why analysis in order to better understand the root cause or causes of the problem. And to be sure, this root cause analysis should always lead to action. And this action plan will be documented in this section. We will note the countermeasure or countermeasures for each root cause. We'll also note who is responsible for the action, what the action is, and when it'll be done. At this point, it's time to check the results and verify whether the countermeasures were successful. We'll once again note who is responsible for doing this, while also noting when it'll be done, how it'll be done, and how often it'll be done. So, like we mentioned earlier, the layout of the A3 is definitely flexible, but the content shown here should be addressed no matter what kind of A3 you're working on. Now, to put this into context of the PDCA process, the left side of this A3 is really focused on the planning phase, meaning we typically spend most of our time describing the problem in background while seeking to identify root causes. Well, the right side of this A3 is where we focused on the do phase, which, as we already mentioned, is when we seek to implement countermeasures for each root cause. And last, but certainly not least, we move into the check and act phases as we seek to verify whether the countermeasures were effective. And no matter if these countermeasures are effective or aren't effective, we'll always learn something worth sharing with others.
Welcome back, everyone. We just finished a module on the A3, and now we're going to talk about the Ishikawa, or the cause and effect diagram. We need to understand what is the current process, what is the current situation. We need to describe the current roles, processes, and systems. We also need to gather some facts and key behaviors about why things are failing, right? What are the breakdowns? What are the larger problems that are happening? And one way to do that is as a team. And as a team, we get together and we do brainstorming, and one of the best brainstorming tools that I know of is the cause and effect diagram. The fishbone diagram is a process improvement diagram. It's designed to identify the contributing root causes to your problem. So we always want to state the problem as a question. In this particular one, you may have seen this slide before. It's bad coffee. Maybe it's a procedure, right? Maybe they're putting too much water. It's not usually a problem that lives in just one spine of the fish. The problem usually is a combination of maybe equipment and people. So as we're constructing the A3 and we're learning about the current condition, the fishbone diagram allows us to be able to dive deep as a team into specific categories. We're going to need those categories later when we build our Pareto chart and our check sheets. So, is it materials? Is it people? Is it methods? Notice this particular slide. This is a great slide because it talks about the causes, sub-causes, and then the reasons for those sub-causes. So we're building 5 whys that we're going to look at in just a moment as we're discussing with our team the brainstorming session around the fishbone diagram. It was done on a whiteboard. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into our tool, into our Excel, and we're going to start building our fishbone. Hello and welcome back. This is the exercise portion of the class, and what you're looking at on the screen is an Excel spreadsheet that I've gone ahead and created for you as a tool. Lean is not about tools. Lean is about critical thinking and lean principles. However, eventually you have to put pen to paper. And when you have to actually document information, you don't want to have to be documenting it all. You don't want to have to be documenting it over and over. In other words, you want to be able to type it once and have it replicate or link to many places. This is what I've created for you. I'm going to fly through it. So I hope that's okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type a question here. It says type your question here. You just put your cursor, you type a question. Why do we say type a question? Well, because the information that I'm putting in this particular part of the spreadsheet where it says on the bottom left-hand corner, start here, your work area, the team is using it to create a future fishbone diagram. So you want to agree on a problem statement, and problem statements, as you know, are set up as a question. So why are requirements having to be reworked? The rest of the information is basic project information. Name, who your customer are, who your customer is, what organization or unit you're working with. Okay, very good. Now you're going to go ahead and list the causes. So in a fishbone diagram, you have 6 different causes. The first one is people. And this is your work area. So what you want to do is you want to come into these cells that say, and what else? Remember that and what else we learned from the coaching habit. It's a way to ask questions. So we want to go ahead and type it in the cells right in front of us. People need more training. Why are requirements having to be reworked? Because people need more training. So you get together with the team and the team agrees on the problem statement. Sometimes we call this the effect. This is written at the mouth of the fish, but it's going to be done for you by the tool. So you don't have to worry about it. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. Now you need to agree on the major categories, and we're going to use the standard categories of people, process, etc. So let's go down to the next category. And it says methods and process. So the teams are not working seamlessly. Why are requirements having to be reworked? Cross-functional communication is on and off. Again, I'm just typing it in. And the cross-functional communication between teams is on and off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste 5 of these over to this particular area of the spreadsheet. Why am I going to go ahead and copy from 20? Why would I copy from 20 options or 20 possible symptoms to the cause of why requirements are having to be reworked from 20 down to 5? And then what is this green cell? Well, the reason we go from 20, team event, and then the team decides on 5, we're doing a funnel, we're reducing, and then we go ahead and we decide on 1. On one area that the team has decided to spend more time and effort to investigate this cause further, because our time and effort is not unlimited. We have a finite amount of energy and time and resources. So in the category method and process, the team has decided to spend more time on why are requirements having to be reworked? Because there's no change control board. Well, maybe there should be a change control board. We should look into that. Well, what about management? In the management category, there's no standards. What about equipment and software? We have all of these different reasons. We have gone ahead and decided to narrow them down to 5. And eventually, we've decided that as a team, to spend further time and effort to investigate no central repository for data as a possible cause, because this is a symptom. As I go through each of the spines of the fish, I'm going to brainstorm all the possible causes, and this is my work area. I'm going to narrow them down to 5. And then I'm going to work with the team. I'm going to brainstorm all the possible causes of the problem. Why is this happening? And then I'm going to ask why again. And why? And why is that happening? Writing down the causes and subcauses in my work area, narrowing them down to 5 areas, and deciding on the one area that I'm going to go ahead and work on further as a team. Let's say that I've gone ahead and finished that. I want to go ahead and remind you of a couple of things. The fishbone diagram that the tool is going to create for you is going to allow the team to stay focused on the causes of the problem rather than on the symptoms. Consider drawing the fishbone diagram in a work area like maybe a whiteboard and having the tool to capture the data and then having the tool there to narrow it down further. Further down the tool, you're going to notice detailed background, and you're going to answer 3 questions. And it's very important that you answer these questions with a certain degree. Further down on the tool, further down in the tool, you're going to be presented with 3 questions. We want to go ahead and fill out background. Why do we need this project now? It's very important to be able to answer that question. Where do things stand today? What are the current processes and results today? And when we talk about taking several snapshots over time, what we want to do is have a diverse view of the background. Why do we need this now? And then what's the current condition? And we're going to type it here, the current. And again, we're going to go ahead and type the background here. And we're going to type the current condition here. And the problem statement. Well, when we talk about the problem statement, remember we stated it as a question. Why are the requirements having to be reworked? This specific problem statement, we're going to add a measure to it, a specific measure. Why? Because that measure is going to serve as our baseline for future performance. A problem statement states a clear impact on the organization. So that's very important, but it's not a proposed solution. It's a clear, specific, measurable problem that we can create a baseline to measure against. Well, when we talk about specific measurable problems and we talk about creating a baseline, that tells me that we're dealing with metrics. And we want to go ahead and type our metrics here. Every metric has a baseline that we have to start from. What is the baseline? And then we need a target. And also a date. So, do we have a metrics? Let's say that we're working for a call center. Why are requirements having to be reworked at a call center? So let me give you an example of a metric. It's unrelated, but it's an example nonetheless. At a call center, we have first call resolution. So the metric could be first call resolution. And the baseline, according to industry standards, is 30 calls per hour. And our target is going to be 27 calls per hour. And we're going to go ahead and choose a date. Great. You're going to notice that this information is automatically going to be transferred. We can have a second metric and a third. Let's go a little further down. All projects are temporary in nature, and because they're temporary in nature, they are time driven. So we need to know a little bit about our project. So this is your work area. We're going to go ahead and type a description about forming the team here. The expected start date notes. So we're going to expect to start maybe next month, but I got some notes. PM will be ready next month on the 3rd. The execution date, perhaps I know a little bit about my execution date, perhaps I don't. And why does this problem exist in terms of causes? In other words, we've done the analysis on the top. In other words, we've gone ahead and decided to, no. So we've typed in the information that we know. So what's the next step? Let's take a look at our traditional fishbone. This is the, so what's our next step? Let's click the fish. So what's the next step? Let's click the traditional fishbone tab. There it is. All the work that we've done has been transferred over to us. We've got our main question, why are projects having to be reworked? And we've got our basic information, and here's our fishbone. And the green, once again, is where the team has decided to focus their efforts. You get a call from your boss, and they say, come over. Why don't you give me, you get a call from your boss, and so what's next? Well, before we click on the traditional fishbone tab, we get a call from our boss, and they say, hey, Almir, Jim, Jeff, what are you working on? Well, we're working on why requirements are having to be reworked. Why don't you come over to my office and let's have a conversation about where you're at? Sure. I'll bring a fishbone diagram with me. Okay. And that's the way the conversation may go. And when you click the traditional fishbone tab, the fishbone is ready to go. All you have to do is print it or take it. It's ready to go. In most projects, we're going to go through a 5 why exercise. By setting up your questions early on in your work area in a 5 why format, when you click the 5 whys tab, it's done for you. Again, this is your work area. You can type additional notes in this area. However, there's nothing to type in any other area of the spreadsheet. Why? Because it's grabbing the information from the Start Here tab. So let's go through the 5 whys exercise and see if it makes sense or if it needs modification. Why are requirements having to be reworked? Teams are struggling to work seamlessly. Why? Cross-functional communication is on and off. Why? Confusion about where to go for answers. Why? There's no centralized repository. Why? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the team has decided that we need more training. But I typed it and nothing happened. Why? So let's go through the exercise and see what happens. Why are requirements having to be reworked? The teams are struggling to work seamlessly. Why? Cross-functional communication is on and off. Why? Confusion about where to go for answers. Why is there confusions? There's no centralized repository. Why isn't there a centralized repository? Not sure. I think we might need more training. But something happens. When I try to type it, I can't. The Excel sheet, when I try to type it, I can't. Remember that the Excel sheet is locked. You have to go back to that work area to type in the information that you want to update. So the teams are struggling to work seamlessly. Okay, well, here we are. The teams are working. Okay, so here we are. So we've updated that cell to say we may need more training. We're not sure. So we're going to investigate need training. I'm going to go back to my fishbone, Need training? Great. I'm going to go to my 5 whys. And there it is. It's been updated. And now I'm going to go back because, and there it is. It's been updated. So why are requirements having to be reworked? No centralized repository. Why is that? We may need more training. That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no centralized repository because we don't have a budget. No, that would go in another area. That doesn't go there. There's no central repository. There's no central repository because no one knows how to set one up. And why doesn't anyone know how to set up a central repository? Because we don't have any training. Because we don't have any training. That's right. It's because no one knows how to set it up because we don't have any training. Why don't we have any training? No. No one knows how to set it up because we need more training. And why do we need more training? Because no one knows how to set up a central repository. And without one, there's confusion about where to go. And confusion leads to on and off communication between cross-functional organizations. And when that happens, teams struggle to work seamlessly. This 5 whys is going to work very well in regards to finding the potential root cause of my problem. So now I can measure. So I'm going to go to my check sheet. And there we are. I have a check sheet. And it's gone ahead and transferred all the information that I'm going to track for me. Now that we've completed our 5 whys, we realize that we can move forward and start tracking. Notice that our 5 whys have been done for us. Anything that I update in the start here, notice that the 5 whys have been done for me. Notice that the 5 whys have been updated automatically. Whatever I update in the start here area will be automatically linked to all the different tabs across my workbook so that I only have to type it once. So now that I've completed my 5 whys and my therefores or so, I can move forward to my check sheet. Now, notice that in my check sheet, all of my categories have been copied over. I cannot make any changes to my check sheet except in the work area because I'm going to track. Because I'm going to track errors. Why are requirements having to be reworked? Because of lack of standards. I'm going to ask the team, in week 1, how many times? I'm going to ask the team, in week 1, I'm going to ask the team, in week 1, how many times were requirements having to be reworked because of no standards? And the team came back and said 26 times. Again, this is the only area that I can update in this particular tab. The team comes back in week 2 and says, why are requirements having to be reworked? The team comes back and the team then moves on to no change control board. How many times were requirements reworked because of no change control board? 9 times. And we move on. And we move on and track for at least 4 weeks so that we can go into our conversation with expert judgment and data. Well, we know that a check sheet is an input to a Pareto chart. When I click my Pareto chart, it's done for me. I'm ready for any presentation that someone may call. I'm ready for any last-minute meeting or presentation. I can easily create a PDF or print what's on the screen. If I want to make changes to anything in my Pareto, I'm going to go back to the Start Here tab, or I'm going to go to my check sheet tab if it's data that I'm going to change. Notice that the first cause covers 35.5%. So if I just work on creating standards, my requirements are going to be, so in my Pareto analysis, no standards came up number 1. Notice that no standards represents 35.5% of the reasons why requirements are having to be reworked. Therefore, if I just work on that one, I'm going to take care of a big chunk of my problems. But wait, if I go ahead and focus on the first two, no standards and no change control, over half of the reported problems will go away. So that's pretty good. At least that's my hypothesis. That's what I'm going to test in my PDCA cycle. At least half. Great. So now that I've gone ahead and looked at my Pareto, perhaps discussed it with the team or with management, most of us have a traditional project view. In other words, most of us have some type of a project template, a traditional one that we have to go ahead and update and send to someone. So I've gone ahead and created this one that has all the artifacts included. Now, let's take a look at why we're here, the A3. There's my A3. I'm going to zoom to my left side. The left side represents the current condition, the current situation. So all of the information has been updated for me. If I type something in the background, it's going to type. So all the information will be updated for me. Again, if I go to Start Here and I go down to my background, if I go to my A3, it will automatically be updated for me. So you only have to type it once. I've also gone ahead and created some tips for you. These tips are from William Hewins, Dr. Hewins' A3 class. Excellent class. I highly recommend that you take it, even if you take my class. His is better. But here you go. All your artifacts have copied over. There's your fishbone. There's your check sheet. You're ready to print, PDF, or put it on the screen and have a conversation with anyone, your teammates, customers, or management. Thanks for watching.